Okay. Alright, so hello everybody. Welcome to the first official offensive security meeting. I know that we've done a couple just random events so far and presented at the typical computer club. But tonight we're going to go into our first actual topic, which is what is hack. If you want to follow along, the link to the slides will be up in the upper right hand corner of the screen the entire time, so don't feel like you have to rush to get them in real quick. First things first, we do need to do an attendance form. So if you go to attendance.offsec.club, it'll ask you for the your email, the date, and just how you're watching. If you're in the Discord, there's an option for that, or on YouTube, just so we have numbers in case we're consistently reaching that Discord stream limit of 50, which I don't think we are tonight, but if that does become an issue, I will look into other options as we go through. So just attendance.offsec.club. Be sure to do that before we get going here. And oh, is it like striped? Okay, one second. Well, of course it's fine on YouTube. Why wouldn't it be fine? Is that better? Okay, thanks. So, okay. So just make sure you fill out the attendance link at some point. If you have a question throughout the presentation, you can go to questions.offsec.club. I have that pulled up on a side monitor here, so feel free to pop something in there and I'll try to get to it as I see it out of the corner of my eye. I also have the Discord Computer Clubs channel pulled up and the YouTube chat, so just feel free to put in something wherever, or if it's something quick, go ahead and unmute and say stuff. The website will be redesigned soon, so don't worry about that. So, okay, moving on. Normally, we like to go over some cool cyber-related current events every week. Throughout this next week, if you see something cool, you can go fill out the form at ce.offsec.club. Should just ask you for like a link to an article and a brief description, so if we need to pull information, we can. A couple that I personally found from this week are there was a exploit in the Cisco Jabber chat client. It's used by certain businesses, so you could just send a message to PopCalc or do whatever you wanted. That has been quote unquote patched. It depends on what version you're running, if it's actually patched right now or not, in terms of the different enterprise levels that they have. So I found that interesting. You can just see the GIF right there of this message contains an exploit, and it just pops calc immediately when the user gets it. So interesting. There was also a way to excuse me, bypass Visa pins if you're using contactless payments. So in a way here, there was essentially, you can, if you're doing an NFC payment, you can have it in a way to where it verifies it on the device itself and not the reader. You can essentially have a dummy card that says that it's good, and then the transaction goes through over there without any money leaving your account. So that's fun, and no pin needed as well. So there's a lot of things in that article if you want to go read that later. So getting back into the main topic, actually, before I do that, one thing that we do want to mention is that we do have the tryouts for CPTC currently open. There's more information if you go to cptc.offsec.club. There's going to be a lot of links today. But essentially, I'll let Kyle hijack this for a second, as he's the main POC for all of this, and he can explain as much or as little as he wants. So go ahead, Kyle.
Yep, at cptc.offsec.club, you will find the documentation for the tryouts, how to do it, how to submit. There's also, well, it's due in a week now. Yeah, go ahead and get started if you haven't already. You'll see my email address, how you submit it. You can send me direct messages if you have questions. Don't talk to like faculty or anything or other students, because they might be judges. So just directly ask me things. You can see me in Discord on the left, the person who's talking right now. I have the same picture over on Slack too, so feel free to send me a message if you have any questions. If you want more info on the competition itself, go to nationalcptc.org, which is down at the bottom there. And I think that's all I got.
Okay, thanks for that. So, again, if you want to reference any of this information, you can go to cptc.offsec.club, or you can access the slides and come right here directly as well. So don't sweat if you don't have something down that you want to see. So moving on, tonight we were going into what is hack. So in general, most hacking is not like your typical movie hacking where you just see type, I'm in. If you haven't seen the NCIS scene where two people try to share the same keyboard to hack, I encourage you to go watch that video. I don't want to pull it up and get copyrighted on our first stream. So keep that in mind. But typically it involves a lot more work than what you'd think. We're going to kind of sidebar and go over a little bit of hacker lingo that we need to do. So the first type is the first thing is the different types of hackers. So there's typically described as hat colors. So there's black hat, gray hat, and white hat. So your black hat hackers are more of the nefarious ones that you're akin to thinking about. So you're, as you were, dark web hackers in a way. They kind of don't really follow any responsible disclosure properties, generally speaking. Your gray hats kind of poke where they shouldn't, but then go ahead and report, and your white hats specifically follow the rules of engagement. One thing that we want to specify in this club is that anything that we teach can be used in very dangerous or potentially incriminating purposes. So if we teach you a technique, please only use it in the legal way that you're allowed to. Don't get caught up in the gray areas of the law. Generally speaking, if you have to ask about it, it's probably not okay, but it is good to ask, even if it's, because it could just be something that isn't as explicitly defined as before. Thank you. So just keep that in mind. We will not bail you out if you do get yourself into trouble anywhere. So just be smart, only attack things that you own or things that you have permission or a written statement that you can do stuff. So if you're ever doing like a bug bounty, you'll have a given scope by the company. Stick to that scope unless they say otherwise. You can VApps in the IA lab. If you make a self-contained VApp to like test out something, just again be careful that you're not attacking actual IA lab infrastructure. Obviously your own physical hardware is fine, just keep in mind where you're hooked up to, right? And then software can have very different terms of services and licenses and things, so just it can be iffy. So again, just double check what you're doing. If you find something, responsible disclosure is important. So if it's something that's widespread, try and get to the company if you can. Just in a general sense, remember to not do illegal stuff. Standard disclaimer, only time I'll say it this year as we go through presentations. So other important terminology that you'll hear us kind of go in and out on is vulnerability, exploit, shellcode, shell, and script. These are all different actions that work, or different phrases that work together, if you will. So a vulnerability in a general sense is a security flaw that can be poked at. It could be something as simple as SQL injection on a website. It could be a remote code execution in Windows itself. There's so many things that you can actually describe as a vulnerability. An exploit, and again, in a more generalized sense, takes advantage of these vulnerabilities to normally run whatever shellcode you want, whether that's shellcode itself as that would drop you a remote shell that you can interact with, or if it's an exploit that would just run a singular command. Generally, there's something in the background going on. So an exploit doesn't necessarily weaponize a vulnerability, but it takes advantage of it to do something else on top. Shellcode is essentially whatever runs to give you a shell. or any other actions. Like sometimes it'll, like for proof of concepts, you commonly see it spawning the calculator on Windows systems or a message box. If you hear someone say, I got a shell, it's what they're interacting with. It's how you run commands on a remote system. It's like if you open command prompt, except it's not on your machine, it's magically on someone else's through whatever means you got that. And scripts generally tie everything together in some way. Sometimes there have explanations in there or other examples you can run. Sometimes it's just a pretty bare bones thing. But again, in a general sense, you're tying a lot together to do all of that. Okay, I have a couple questions here. What is a Red Hat hacker? So, a Red Hat, well, Red Hat is a OS that you can run. I have not really heard of a specific Red Hat hacker in terms of black, gray, white. So if you're trying to do a joke, I can't tell through text. I'm sorry. My best hack story I'll get into in a little bit, so I'm going to save that, whoever asked that. And if YouTube audio is a bit quiet, I'm sorry. I haven't maxed out in OBS as much as I can do. So, yeah, my bad. So I'll look into it. So normally, if you're asking, okay, so if that's the general sense of some lingo that you might hear around, normally you'll find a vulnerability somewhere, or you'll be made aware of a vulnerability through your reconnaissance scans. So in a general sense, when you start to sit down and you're like, I want to get into this machine, you're going to scan for what's running using Nmap or other various reconnaissance tools. We'll look at some of those in a little bit. And we'll see if something exists. We'll find like a version, so we can look up if there's an exploit that already exists for that version, or if there's just a known technique you can do. Or there's sometimes even you have to do custom exploitation. We'll explore some of those topics here in a little bit and further in future meetings as well. So once you find a vulnerability, generally you're going to exploit the vuln. And you'll see where you land. Sometimes you'll get full administrator access right off the bat. Other times you'll just get into like a non-privileged user, and you'll have to do more enumeration and more exploits, and you repeat this until you get to where you want to be. Generally, that's either root on Linux, or administrator and authority system on Windows. So it's always a constant cycle of going back and trying to get the information you need if you didn't get it through the first round. Enumeration is very important. So it's important when you do that. Not every box is going to be the same, so you have to know how to utilize your results that you find from all these various tools to pick the right plan of attack for that box. We will go more into enumeration in our tentatively in our September 23rd meeting. In particular, just show how some of these different tools go and kind of where your patterns would be. It's also important to note that as technology evolves, there are going to be different techniques to get into places. So keeping up with those techniques is very important. Always is something that you can practice. Tentatively next week, these two meetings might get flopped, but I doubt it. We're going to go into some ways to practice on your own at our meeting next week. So if you've heard Hack the Box, VulnHub, Try Hack Me, King of the Hill, we'll go into some of those later as well. So now that we have, in a very general sense, know the process of hacking, typically when people ask how do I start, I'll tell them, well, you need a Kali VM. Normally you'll see us use Kali OS. It's a specific Linux distribution with a lot of hacking tools built in. There's another option that's pretty popular now called Parrot OS. I know that Hack the Box has partnered with them to do like some virtual, what do they call that? The Hack Box or something in the browser. Either is good. They both have nearly the same tools. It's just how you want your stuff structured. I'm going to focus on Kali for this. So this is going to be more geared towards people that are coming in and might not have this VM set up. So if we quickly go over some options for running Kali, you don't normally want to install it on your own host hardware. It's not meant for that. Parrot kind of solved that, but again, I'm focusing on Kali right now. So normally you'll run it in a virtual machine. If you are a DSU student, you can get a free copy of VMware Workstation Professional or VMware Fusion if you're a Mac user from the link dsu.onthehub.com. You'll create an account with your Trojan's credentials. You should have this VMware tab down here under students once you sign in, and then you'll just get the license key for Mac OS and Windows. I think those extend your trial out by a year, and then you can get another key as long as you're a current student in, I think it's 11 months from when you get your first one. So you can get that to run a Kali VM or any other VMs that you need for class if you don't want to use VirtualBox or Workstation Player for some reason. If you're going the Kali route, the link to get the latest VM is there on the page. Right now it is 2020.3, so it's the third release of the year 2020 that they're on. You'll probably want the 64-bit VM unless your computer's a potato, which in that case, go ahead and do the 32-bit. You'll just be a little limited on certain things. If you do download that file, you'll just unzip it, double-click the VMX on Windows, or it'll be, I think it's a .vm bundle extension on Mac, but you'll just import that right into whichever VMware product you're using, and you'll start the machine, and the default creds now are Kali, and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to show that a little bit over here on the side. So if we switch over, hopefully, and let me switch the Discord stream as well. Okay. So if I log into Kali, this is a fresh VM downloaded from that exact same link that was in the slides, and logged in with Kali. You could also just grab the ISO and install it to have a different desktop environment right out of the start if you wanted. By default, I like the one that they have, but if we look in here, once you're logged in the upper left, I know you might not be able to see my cursor depending on what platform you're streaming on or you're watching on, but just bear with me here. So if you click your little menu icon in the upper left, you'll see that a lot of the tools are sorted into these various different categories for you. So for instance, if you needed to do your reconnaissance, you can instantly see a list of tools that you do, and there's even subcategories inside of there for various things. So if you're just poking around trying to see what you'd use in different situations, you can do just look in the menus and find that. We will go more into some recon, Nmap, recon NG in our recon meeting as well. So talk about that. But there's all sorts of things that Kali comes loaded with by default. You don't have to launch them through the menu. Obviously, there is the terminal aspect, which you see on Kali. That is really tiny. Of course, keyboard shortcuts aren't going to work. There we go. Beautiful. So, if you have never used a Linux-based OS before, I encourage you. We just had a meeting earlier this week on Linux Command Line Essentials on Monday, and I know DevSec went into some stuff yesterday as well. So if you have never used a Linux terminal in your life, I encourage you to go watch that. It was very informative. In a general sense, you will be running a lot of your tools from command line, like Nmap or Metasploit. So if I can type. So the annoying thing about the new Kali is that if you're in this Kali user, a lot of your things have to be run with the sudo flag. So if you are messing around with that, just keep that in mind. But in general, how you would associate a how you would start a hack here is you would perform your recon scan. So if you're testing your tools, there's scanme.nmap.org that you can feel free to kind of look at and see how some of these tools would function. So you can see that there's a couple things open, and you could poke around on there. If you add some flags, again, we'll get into this later, so don't worry about it. You can see how things just get more information back depending on how you do it. But in a general sense, you're just going to do your reconnaissance and then go from there depending on what you find. So I guess ZenMap, one of the questions that I had, ZenMap is a GUI, a graphical interface for Nmap. Where do you even see that in here now? Well, I don't like it because it's not installed by Kali on default apparently anymore. So there are, depending on how you want to function, there are command line tools and GUI tools that normally do the same thing. I would encourage people, if you really want to get into this, to try and learn the command line options, just because it will make your life easier if you're getting a tool that doesn't have a GUI, which is very common in this world. You're not seeing any VMware software on the hub. So there is if you're signed in with your student account, if you just made an on the hub, you might have to go renew your eligibility. I want to say if you click your name and click account, there's something in there where you can go submit the auto request to do that. I can't exactly remember how that process goes, but if you want to stick around, I can try and help you with that as well. So I know I've gone through a lot so far, kind of branching off. Does anyone have any additional questions or anything so far? I'll pause to let the chats go in, or if people in here have a question and want to unmute, feel free. I'll just pause for a second. Okay. So okay. So not seeing anything else, I'm going to keep going on a little bit here. So if we go back to the slides through the very convoluted method of Discord. There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to back up just for a second and go back to our terminology here. So when you're going through all of this, the main thing that you'll hear people is there's various ways to find a vulnerability. It could be a web vulnerability, custom exploitation, there could be some service running. That's a very broad sense. If you're going through and need somewhere to start, there are lists of very easy hack the box or vulnhub machines. If you're doing hack the box, it's a bit more to get in and get started, but if you're doing vulnhub, it will just be another VM that you'd import into your VMware or whatever virtual appliance you're using. So yeah. I don't know if I had that other section in here. No, I do not. So, I guess I know that this meeting was a bit shorter than the other clubs that have gone through this week. I wanted to do more of I had planned this when we were still thinking about potentially going in person as doing like a live help getting people set up with VMs. So if you have any questions with that, I'll stick around for a little bit. Or if you have any other stories, I did mention that I'd say my hacking story. Why do I not like VirtualBox? Because it's not... I don't hate VirtualBox. I just think that if you can get VMware for free, it's better to do some of the networking behind the scenes stuff on if you're getting into more complicated scenarios. And it interacts with remote ESXi machines a lot better. So I personally prefer that. If you're comfortable with VirtualBox, that's totally fine. You know how to set it up. If you come to me with a really obscure problem on VirtualBox, I won't exactly know how to help you right off the bat. So, with that being said, if you guys don't have any questions, or if you already have a Kali set up and good to go, I encourage you to get one set up for future meetings. And so that way we can jump right on in and get started with that. Keep in mind, I'll stick around for a little bit if people have questions on setting any of that up or any questions on anything I've gone over. Someone did just put in the difference between Kali and Parrot. So admittedly now, Kali has moved more to a Parrot OS model. Initially you logged into Kali as the root user, which you generally don't want to do if you're running something on a bare metal OS. So now Kali has this, like the Kali user, the Kali default credentials. So everything's a bit more isolated. Parrot was designed to kind of be a security researcher's primary OS first. So then you'd have everything running separately. I haven't messed with it too terribly much, so I'm not sure if they've done any differences with that. But Kali is generally the one that you'll hear more in industry. I wouldn't be surprised if it shifts to Parrot eventually. But for now, it's really, it doesn't matter what OS you do. It's the tools that you're running are going to interact the same or nearly identically the same on whatever OS. You could very well install everything on, say, Ubuntu and hack from there if you wanted to. Someone's pestering me for my favorite hack story still. I was once testing a tool that I had developed, and I was once testing a tool that I developed, and I was doing a network scan to see if something worked, and I ended up going down a deep rabbit hole that ended up being the old TV I had at the time, and finding some stuff in there. I was actually able to find a service that was on that TV and figure out how to execute code on that TV to pop a dialog box. That's probably one of my favorite hacking stories that is not under a disclosure agreement currently, and I can go more into that if people are interested at some time. But if people don't have any other questions, I'll stick around for a bit if you're wanting to get stuff in or have other things. Otherwise, I'll just again remind people, make sure to fill out the attendance if you haven't for tonight. Find something cool throughout the week, submit a current event, and then I'll leave on this CPTC slide. So just if you're interested in that, you have a week to go through, read all the rules, do your qualification documents. And yeah, so that being said, I know it was short. We're going to have some longer meetings next week. I just want everyone to have an opportunity to get a general overview and understand Kali, and to get that installed.